Okay, welcome back to another episode of Talking Headstones. Today we're in the Hawkesbury. We're at Hawkins Lookout overlooking the beautiful Hawkesbury River. So we're going to head on down to Wiseman's Ferry, which is about 5 minutes away from here. Then we're going to head to Lawtondale to the cemetery there, and we're going to visit my four-by-great-grandfather Richard Woodbury and his wife Sarah near Everingham, who are buried there along with their son Matthew James Woodbury. So I thought I'd just stop here and show you this lookout, the beautiful view of the Hawkesbury there. There you can see the Webbs Creek Ferry crossing. And to our left, or your right, which is down that way, is the Del Rio Riverside Resort. I don't know if you can pick it up here, but that branch of the river going off to the left, that is the McDonald River. So I'll bring you back when we get down to the cemetery. Okay, so we've arrived here at the Lawtondale Cemetery, sometimes known as the Forgotten Cemetery. So right here in front of me we have the Hicks family. Fairly recent graves, these ones. Here we have Alice Amelia Wilson, died 31st of July 1932. Also Sarah Lena Matilda Wilson, died March, I think that's 63, in her 92nd year. So we'll go for a wander out, see if we can find Richard, Sarah and Matthew James. Like I said, there's also other early settlers buried here, like who this place is named after, Solomon Wiseman. So we'll just have a look around. And up there, I don't know if you can see through the trees, there's more graves up there, so we'll try and find a way up there. And I'll tell you a bit about the life of Richard and his family, how they lived in from this area up to the Mangrove Creek area. Have the grave of Hugh Doherty. He was one of the founding settlers of this area, which they used to call Lower Portland or Wiseman's Ferry. It says sacred to the memory of Hugh Doherty, who departed this life. I can't read that, what that says, but it might come up clearer on the camera and I'll be able to put it up, his death date. But that's Hugh Doherty, one of the founding settlers here. Sacred to the memory of Mary Ann Rose, who departed this life September 1828, aged 20 something. William Rose, John Hackett, sacred to the memory of John Hackett, departed this life July 8th, 1842, aged 80. Unto thy altar, for a broken heart brings something graciously. But they're beautiful words. I don't know, can't quite read them. Here we have to the memory of Mary Dollery, wife of John Dollery, who departed this life January 1839, age 50. I'll let you read that because I am pretty hopeless at trying to read some of these. Thomas Edwards, part of this life March 13th, 1838, age 56. Also Elizabeth, his wife, who died 17th of April 1853, age 78. No ills can reach him now, he rests above, safe in the bosom of celestial love. Over here we've got some of the butlers. Anne Butler, 1833, Joseph Butler, 1905. Sylvester Butler, 1909. Henry Smith died on this day, 28th day of June 1881, age 91. Here we have William Isaac. Right, so we'll head on up to Richard and Sarah's and Matthew James's grave. So I just want to read a bit about them. So Richard, believed to be born in 1781 in Bristol, England. He lived on Currant Lane off Prince Street in the parish of St Nicholas in 1803. He was aged 22 and was a brewer when convicted of stealing 6 gallons of brandy off George Taylor, a victualler, a person licensed to sell alcohol, on the quay at the Bristol Sessions on October 29, 1803, for which he was sentenced to transportation for 7 years to the colony of New South Wales. Sarah Elizabeth Everingham was born 1793 in the Ponds, Rydalmere, New South Wales. She was the second daughter of Matthew James and Elizabeth Rhymes, who were first and second fleeters respectively. It is a family belief or legend that Richard served on the Victory under Lord Admiral Nelson and seen him fall and was wounded himself, but there is no actual proof of this. He may have been conscripted out of the Hulks, as the Battle of Trafalgar occurred on October 28, 1805, and Richard left England on the Fortune January 28, 1806. Whether true or not, his legend only grew once arriving in Australia 6 months later. He was sent straight to the government farm at Castle Hill and probably left there about 1807 to work in Andrew Thompson's brewery in Green Hills, Windsor, near the present-day courthouse. So I can see where his grave is, so we'll go over there and I'll read a bit more about his life and show you his tombstone. So here we have, to the left here, we have to loving memory of Richard Woodbury, 1781 to 1867, and Sarah Woodbury, 1874, so 1796, I believe, to 1874. This grave never used to be marked, but it is now. But it was always said that they were next to their son, which is Matthew James Woodbury. So he says he departed this life November 1835, aged 7 years, 4 months, 8 days. So back to Richard's story. By 1810, Richard was a free man and married Sarah Everingham on December 10th. Richard was 29 and Sarah 17. He was literate as he signed the marriage cert, but Sarah probably not, as there was no signature. The wedding was witnessed by her father Matthew James, Matthew Hughes, the schoolmaster, James Smith, and William Beadle, an old Hawkesbury settler who arrived on the Royal Admiral in 1792. They lived in a cottage on Thompson's property at South Creek, where Richard Jr. was born September 11th, 1811, and Elizabeth December 3rd, 1812, as a boat goes by in the background. By 1811, Richard seems to have partnership with Henry Cable, another first fleeter on the Friendship. For on the 28th of September, an article appeared in the Sydney Gazette, which you'll see now, just after compulsory brewing licences were introduced. By the end of 1812, he had rented the brewery from the Thompsons' estate on his own behalf, but did not renew the lease after 1813 because of the big inquiry, which was an inquiry into the establishment being too big for the Windsor area. He then started brewing in a smaller premises on Macquarie Street opposite the new marketplace. Thompson's brewery was used as a barracks, then a hospital before being demolished. A son, William, was born October 24th, 1814 at Macquarie Street, Windsor, who would be my three-by great-grandfather. The census was taken in October 1814, listed Richard as a brewer and himself and his children off stores. He also had a convict servant, Morris Quinlan, also off stores. Richard by now had bought two properties, one at Sawyers Reach, which is Cambridge Reach, Lower Portland, which is back down towards the Colo River, and the other at Half Moon Reach, which is now modern day Leetsvale. On February 17th, 1816, the brewery was put up for auction. It is unclear why Richard quit brewery, maybe for debts owed. The Sawyers Reach property was also sold and the family had moved back to Windsor. Jeremiah was born on the 8th of August 1816 and baptised May 25th, 1817. Richard's father-in-law, Matthew James Everingham, died December 25th, 1817, which I talked about in my previous video on Matthew James. The first settlers at Wiseman's Ferry. In 1818, Richard had applied for a government grant for 80 acres in Lawtondale, near Wiseman's Ferry. James Meehan surveyed the properties. Other settlers granted property here were David Alexander Cross, Patrick Cleary, William Stubbs, Joshua Rose, which I believe some of their graves are here, Hugh Doherty, who we had a look at, he's just off to my left here, William Warder, John William and Richard Cobcroft, who I just did a video on their grave that's at Wilberforce, and also who was right next to me here, Solomon Wiseman. This area was known as First Branch, also known as Lower Portland, Down River, and finally Wiseman's Ferry. So this is Solomon Wiseman's grave and his wife Jade, who died 12th of January 1838, aged 61. Jade Wiseman, who died 20th of June 1821, aged 45. So in 1820, Richard was appointed District Constable and Pound Keeper for the Lower Hawkesbury, like his father-in-law. Richard's new job would leave Sarah with the responsibility of the family, and Rebecca was born December 20th, 1820. So I'm just going to read you a story out of the Valorie Ross book, A Hawkesbury Story, a bit about the work Richard Woodbury did as the District Constable. So this is the story of Devil. So I'll just start it off. So peaceful are the environments of the Greens that it's hard to imagine the dramatic events of the Woodbury sojourn ever having occurred. For through the surrounding bushland during 1824, there moved an Aborigine who, like earlier Branch Jack, was determined to contest the white man's intrusion at every chance. What few natives remained in this area would seem by now to have accepted the settlement. They continued for many years in their own ways, procuring their bark boats and coolamons from the trees at canoe lands and ochre at the paintworks for their corroborees. However, Devil was known to his fellows by the name that kept for their evil spirits. Because of deformity, his foot was cloven. The whites called him Bumblefoot and easily recognised him, but despite his disability, he was strong and agile enough to take his victims unaware. So on September 19th, 1824, he appeared in the Newcastle area and attacked and nearly decapitated the convict Jeremiah Buffy, who was mentioned earlier as Thomas Till's partner. Then it was claimed that he had murdered a servant of Mr. Dixon's of Windsor in the bush. In early October, he was at Lower Hawkesbury between the farms of William Stubbs and Archibald Bell when he came upon a lad, the brother-in-law of Stubbs' overseer, knocked him down and left him senseless, stealing eatables and cloves. Soon after, Bumblefoot went to the hut of Joseph Sands, a servant of George McGuinness, and tried to bargain a gun for food, claiming that he had got it from bushrangers for 2 emus. The other natives now told Richard Woodbury that Sands had Devil's gun, and as the gun, a fowling piece, was thought to belong to the murdered man. On February 3rd, 1825, the Sydney Gazette reported that the Aborigine had been charged with murder in the Supreme Court. At that time, because Devil could not understand the English language, as there was no one in attendance that could act as an interpreter, the prisoner was remanded. His Honour, the Chief Justice, observed that it would be difficult to try a case like the present under Lord Allenborough's Act, but suggested the propriety of framing an information for an aggravated assault which would be indictable at common law. So somehow Richard had managed to catch Devil and lodged him in Windsor Jail with great difficulty. From a letter written by Reverend Thomas Hassel by Richard, we know that horses were few at Lower Hawkesbury and that he did not own one, so that he must have stalked Devil on foot and then rode the captive to Windsor. By June 3rd, 1825, Devil had been indicted for a violent assault on Jeremiah Buffy and found guilty. According to available records, he was not sentenced, but the Reverend Lancelot Threckeld later wrote that the Aborigine had spent a considerable time in jail for this offence. The clergyman referred to Bumblefoot's habitual wickedness, for the native had threatened to kill him because Threckhold had told him to return to his home, Mangrove, 40 miles distant from Newcastle. Previously, Devil had been about to tie a tree, spear, roast, and eat an Aboriginal woman whose husband's death through illness he blamed upon her. Mythologically, the children of Pan and biblically the children of the devil are said to have cloven feet. Bumblefoot attained immortality at last, for according to Mr. Amos Douglas of Upper Mangrove, he was murdered by other blacks on the mountain between Mangrove and Yarramalong, and that now bears his name, Bumble Hill. As for Jeremiah Buffy, Devil's victim and the former part of the ill-fated Till, he was granted a ticket of leave on consideration of having been so seriously wounded. So that's a bit of one of the stories of the stuff that Richard would have done. So he would have had to have tracked Devil or Bumblefoot by foot through this harsh bushland that you see behind me, to capture him and to bring him to justice. So we'll continue walking around and I'll read a bit more about the life of Richard. On November 5th, 1822, John was born. By 1824, due to floods, the Lawtondale farm was sold and Richard applied for another grant in December 1825 for 50 acres at the head of the Mangrove Creek. It is believed he never lived here due to his work, but his son Richard Jr. was living here in 1828. This is also the start of the Woodbury, Everinghams and Chaselings of having a long history in the mangrove area. So here's some of the green trees. Just right here is Sarah Chaseley, died October 4th, 1878, aged 80. And Sarah Greentree, Thomas Greentree. And over here behind this beautiful wrought iron fencing is Sarah Green Tree. So we're going to talk a little bit about Richard and Solomon Wiseman's relationship. There's Richard Martin, Leslie Berry and Roy Walker. So we'll head back over to Solomon's grave. So Richmond and Solomon, according to Richard's terms, became enemies. Solomon's history with the river begins in 1811 as a boat owner. He received a spirit license in 1821 for the first income home, in inverted brackets, the site of Packet, which was located at Mill Creek on the south side of the river. So there's the river over there. I think Mill Creek is on the other side of the river. He was described by Reverend Thomas Aitken as a deeply read in corruption of human nature. He was reputed to have received contracts through bribery and was known to be harsh to convict servants. Richard's Lawtondale property was sold in 1824 to John Hunter, and the Woodburys moved to the Greens on the other side of the river. Here 3 more children were born. Anne 1824, Jane 1826 and Matthew James 1828. By this time, the Great North Road had been under construction for 2 years, bringing lots of escapee convicts to the area, which Richard would have apprehended and jailed. By now, Richard had decided to leave the Wiseman's Ferry area and move up to Mangrove Creek. He had a 70-acre property at Poplands, which Richard Jr. rented 15 acres. As well as farming in Mangrove, Richard was in 1830 contracted to supply victuals to the number 9 iron gang working on the Great Northern Road. Another son, George James, was born 1831. So over the next 30 years, Richard's children married, and through misfortune, properties were sold and new ones bought. Richard had retained a property at Milkmays Reach and had a 2-story house on it. In 1850, he sold it to his son William, but remained there until his death in 1867. So that's my 4-by-great-grandfather, Richard Woodbury. There is also a Richard Woodbury Reserve, which I'll put pictures up of, up at Mangrove Creek, just past Green Grove. So this is the Lawtondale Cemetery. But times were tough out here in the early 1800s, the mid 1800s. A lot of the travel would have been done by river, so a lot of these settlers were experienced boatmen. This one's fallen over. You can read it. John Phillips. There's all ants all over that, but so I'm not going to try and wipe it off. I believe that says John Phillips. Can't read any other writing on there. Okay, so that just about wraps up our visit here to Lawtondale Cemetery here at Wiseman's Ferry. You can see the Hawkesbury River behind me. I hope you enjoyed the story of Richard Woodbury, and a little bit about Sarah, more about Richard. So if you like this type of stuff, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you on the next episode of Talking Headstones. So rest in peace, Richard Woodbury and Sarah Woodbury and young Matthew James Woodbury, and to all the other early settlers that are here, the green trees, the roses, the Lawtons, the Dohertys. Rest in peace, everyone, and thanks for watching. Bye for now.